Folks, welcome to another Cygilant webinar. My name's Joe Murphy, Director of Marketing here at Cygilant. And today I'm joined by Jake McCabe, who's the Pre-Sales Director at LogPoint, and my colleague, Dr. Ben Harrison. Ben heads up our Security Operations Center and has been in the space for quite some time. Both of these individuals have a ton of expertise around higher education specifically in terms of cybersecurity and how those who are on the IT or cybersecurity teams at colleges or universities are able to scale up their program. So today, what we're going to be providing you all with is some takeaways on how you can deal with the challenges that are facing your industry. So, the traditional campus is a thing of the past. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into a little bit of the unique use cases in cybersecurity for higher education. So Jake and Ben, welcome. Thank you guys very much for taking the time out of the day. And let's dive right into it. So some of the unique challenges in higher education. Ben, do you want to take the lead on this slide here?
Yeah, happy to. So first off, as I'm looking at the participant list growing, and I just wanted to say, Joe, I hope everyone's appreciative of my new camera. I went to a lot of effort after the comment we had that my old camera wasn't good enough, and with a backlight and a camera now, hopefully this meets everyone's expectations. So yeah, jumping in with the content. Yeah, absolutely. It is an interesting challenge. It's a unique challenge as well. Higher education is distinctly different to other educational authorities and is also very different to most other businesses. And there's a number of reasons for that. Some bullet points we have there, but starting at the beginning, huge campuses. You have a very large campus. You don't have a single building. You don't have a small tight-knit area. Many university and higher education campuses include residential areas for students and those studying. They include remote sites. They include remote offices. And that really gives this huge open network. It's a huge real estate to manage. It's a huge real estate to secure. And it's a huge real estate to monitor. And it's a very unique element in the fact that you've got that mix of teaching, learning, residential, back office, in many cases labs, experimentation, technical labs and experimentation, R&D. It's a very diverse range, and that really gives an interesting challenge. You've also got this really other interesting concern or interesting problem, and one that we have both recently and historically always had a lot of involvement with, which is insider threats. And whenever I talk about insider threats, I need to be clear. I'm not suggesting that every single insider is a threat. What I'm saying is that at a university, you've got this interesting mix. A college has got this interesting mix of users because many colleges teach cybersecurity. They teach technical courses, which are going to attract the best and attract the curious. And even if it's not a technical focus of the college, you still attract people who are interested, people who want to learn, people who want to develop. And cybersecurity is a hot topic. So you get a lot of inside people, some of whom you may in fact be training in attack and defense, who are in your network. And they are insiders, and sometimes curiosity gets the better of them. And I'm glad to say that in the vast majority of cases we've dealt with in the past year, it hasn't really been malicious. It's been, it's actually been accidental in most cases, or just curiousness in others. And a good example we had was maybe a couple of months ago, an insider took out the entire network for a period of time. And the reason it happened, they'd actually done nothing wrong. They were following their class schedule. They were following their teaching material and their lab exercises. They just typed in the wrong IP address. And instead of launching an attack against a known weak server that was part of their lab environment, they launched the attack against one of their major infrastructure pieces and brought it down. So it was good to get to the bottom of that. It was good that it wasn't an outside threat, but it does certainly happen. It's an interesting challenge there. And people do get curious. As well as that, moving on, you've got this really high annual turnover. I mean, most organizations, most environments, you learn your users pretty quickly. But for higher educational groups, you learn your users and then a year later, they're all different. Or a third of them are different, or half of them are different. It's a really unique challenge. Generally, the staff turnover isn't as high, but the users, doesn't just restrict themselves to staff. I mean, your students, your pupils, the people studying are also users. And that variation can make things really challenging. And Jake's going to talk a little bit later about user event behavior analysis, because that's a really key part of this. That's one of the things that makes it so challenging, is you go and put a lot of effort into that, and your user baseline changes, which can really add challenge to that. You've also then got the seasonal variation. So whereas most organizations are pretty much constant throughout the year, with maybe you get a bit of a break during Thanksgiving, a bit of a break around Christmas time if you're in certain parts of the world. But with the academic calendar, you pretty much have silence during spring break, silence for a good few months over the summer period, and then intense busyness during the semester times. And then you've got that really boom bust style to your IT infrastructure, where it is frantically busy for a couple of months out of the year, and then it's quiet. And that can be really frustrating, because it's hard to scale to that. It's really difficult to get to that. And then that also affects the times you can actually make changes to your infrastructure, because your academic calendar is 100% applied there. Whether or not you've got the time is not just as important as, well, can we bring down the login systems right when we're doing enrollment? And the answer is usually definitely not. And so that's really what it comes down to, the interesting challenges. And then the final one there, places of learning have a certain element of freedom of expression, freedom to learn, freedom to think. And heavy-handed IT policies, unfortunately, don't go well with that. So I'm going to hand over to Jake on that, who's going to talk a little bit about how you balance that open access with the security that's required.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ben. So yes, you're exactly correct. I mean, educational environments traditionally have been a bastion of liberalism. So it's very much been the idea that you can't do anything that would potentially inhibit someone's ability to think or to learn. And so that may be changing in today's political climate, but for the most part, it's still true. Where basically, in order to secure an environment, you have to do so in very much in a manner that doesn't prohibit someone from potentially that doesn't infringe on their freedom of thought or for freedom of expression. And so definitely there's a balance between security and allowing that free thought. There's another thing that's intrinsic to educational environments is, typically we're talking about at least two distinct environments. You've got your student environment and you've got your faculty and staff environment. And in fact, you might have other environments as well for different departments and whatnot. But essentially, with respect to faculty and staff, that's probably more akin to a traditional enterprise environment, where you typically have borders around it. You have your resources, but you also have managed devices, and you can put controls on them, preventive controls, it's more like a traditional company would operate. However, within the student environment, it's much more open, and you have much less ability to use preventive controls. So you have to rely much more on detective controls. And being able to see what's happening and be able to potentially take action, but like I said, not infringe on someone's freedom of expression. And so in those cases, you rely on tools like NAC. Basically, in the student environment, you have network-based tools that you can use, but you maybe don't have the ability to use host-based tools. So you deploy at the network layer. Detective controls, and really from a security standpoint, the requirements are different as well. So if we think of the CIA, the CIA triangle, where confidentiality, integrity, and availability are the three pillars of security. On the faculty environment, it's more focused on potentially confidentiality and integrity. Whereas in the student environment, it's more focused on availability. So really what you're trying to do from a security standpoint is make sure that those students aren't going to do something that would potentially take down the network and impact the other students. However, to some degree, you have to kind of let them do what they're going to do, unless it's illegal or, like I said, unless it potentially impacts other resources. And so it definitely makes it challenging. And this is actually something that's, this is not new for the education space. This is something that they've been dealing with some time. So to some degree, it's a problem that's that's kind of I'm not going to say it's been solved, but it's not a new problem necessarily. However, I think with what we're seeing now with COVID, we are starting to see some different challenges in some ways, and some of the same challenges in other ways. So at this point, Ben, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that COVID brings.
Sure, absolutely. So COVID has been with us for 9 months or so. It's not going away anytime soon. While there's been some really good news recently in the news, that good news is going to take a long time to trickle down to practical changes to allow us to go back to, I say, the new normal, a better new normal than we have right now. So because those aren't disappearing anytime soon, these challenges are absolutely critical for the next 1, possibly 2, maybe 3 years, as we plan and as we implement and as we operate our security practices. So the big hit in this is that we've lost visibility, lost a huge amount of visibility. We've lost a huge amount of control. Now, some people have looked at this as a good thing because it's proved, look, business, society, education can function in a remote world. And yeah, we can function. I wish I could see my colleagues in person a bit more, but we can function remotely, and that's been a definite positive. It's proved that. And a friend of mine who's a director of education here in Belfast, Northern Ireland, said to me a week ago that COVID has done more for distance learning than the previous 30 years of investment. And so definitely do look at the positives, but the negatives are irrefutable. We need to be considerate of these, and especially from a security perspective. So we've lost that remote FaceTime. We've lost the sense of community in some respect, and we've lost a ton of visibility of both the systems and the control over them. An awful lot of people are now using their home network. We have VPNs where possible, but that's not always possible. And even with that, you can't really control the end network device. You really don't have as much control as you did, or definitely don't have control over the environment. Other things that maybe haven't been mentioned before, which are important, particularly for the likes of university and colleges, intelligence gathering opportunities afforded by remote learning and remote working. I'll give an example of an experiment which myself and some colleagues did a few weeks ago. And what we did was we sent 2 phishing emails, test phishing emails, one of which was something along the lines of, hello, this is Professor Jones, and we would like you to click on this link and download the file for next week's class. And that's a common one. Anyone here has seen it. Anyone who's in a higher education and in IT will have seen hundreds of those. If you look at your spam filter, they'll be filled. However, the second one we sent was a bit more insidious. What we did was we spoke to the professor who was taking the class, got their course material, and actually got a video of their lecture. And then what we did is we sent the same email, but we put in a sentence about, if you remember from the last lecture, we talked about this, and I said I would send on a file with this. This is the file. Now, because I now have context, because I now have a bit of insider knowledge, the uptick in that phishing went from like 2% to 90%. So I got 90% of a cybersecurity class to click a link just because I knew what material had been covered in the previous lecture. So these remote activities are critical. Zoom jacking is not just about being a nuisance. You've got to consider your security across the board, and that's access to your infrastructure, access to your people, and that intelligence gathering aspect as well from a phishing perspective. Absolutely still there, absolutely still critical. And as time has gone on, attackers are getting more and more inventive with their methods. They're exploiting the situation more and more. They're getting better at it, and they'll continue to do so. So we have to up our game as well. Where this comes down to is we really, really need to double down on our identity and our access management. We need 2-factor authentication everywhere, on everything, and that includes logging into Zoom. Now, I can say with honesty that to log into Zoom today, I had to use my phone because I've enabled 2-factor authentication. I need that to get access to passwords. But everybody should be doing that, and it's really critical that we identify people and verify, trust and verify. So again, we can't really rely on our firewalls and our VPNs. It's not just that element. We have lost the social contact to a degree. We've given far more opportunity to intelligence gathering and outsider threats. So, Jake, I think I'm passing back to you about our security monitoring program.
Yeah, sure. And just to add a couple points to what you said, Ben. So certainly IAM it's a much bigger priority because as things are moving to the cloud, really you're losing that that perimeter, that traditional perimeter of a firewall. So you have to rely much more on making sure that someone who signs into something is who they say they are. Additionally, basically COVID is throwing everyone headlong into the cloud, whether or not they were ready to go. And so the other thing that's really important is security awareness. So basically, teaching, I think for the most part, maybe students are a little bit more savvy with respect to cloud services, but it might be your faculty and staff who are more traditional, and those are the folks that that need to be educated on the fact that that they're using a lot more cloud services than they than they have in the past, and they have to be careful about what they send as links and what they click on themselves as links. And so I think that the next slide talks a little bit about how we can start to think about securing those environments. And of course, the one thing I didn't mention is, this regardless of what whether or not you're talking about COVID or not, really there's always been a huge emphasis on logging and being able to have visibility into what's happening in your environment. And so now the question is, can you effectively implement security monitoring in-house? And to that end, I would say that LogPoint, here at LogPoint, we've done, we certainly pride ourselves in having built a SIEM that is actually easy to deploy. And so what that means is, our SIEM is distributed as software. So you can basically just, you can install it in a virtual environment, and it can be up and running in a matter of less than an hour. And we've built, we have support for hundreds of different devices and applications. So taking in logs from various places is quite easy. We've built the support already. We've also built thousands of pre-built use cases. So the things that you would want to do with a SIEM, the questions that you would want to answer, we've actually already built those. So the challenge of setting them up is really one of selecting which use cases you want to implement, or which ones you want to enable, and then just clicking a button and enabling them. So we've made that part really easy. We also have a UEBA, which is a user and entity behavioral analytics, and UEBA is essentially it's layering on top of traditional SIEM technology. It's layering on top of that behavioral approach. So you're looking for threats based on changes in behavior of your users and in your servers and other entities within your environment. So we make it really easy to detect known and unknown threats. We also allow you to automate responses to threats. So if you've got a threat that looks for hosts that are scanning in your environment, and that you always want to shut them down, you can set it up so that it would automatically black hole that host. Or if you see some user doing something that's prohibited, you could have that interact with your IAM system and actually disable that user account. And so really the goal of a SIEM is to take a large amount of data in and to output a small amount of data, an amount of data that's manageable to you. So really, to that end, we've tried to empower LogPoint customers so that they spend less time configuring and setting up LogPoint and more time for investigations. That being said, I will admit that a SIEM is still not a set and forget type of tool. So it's not the kind of thing that you just set up and let it run. And so, basically the maximum value comes from a SIEM is, not just being able to see what it detects, it's being able to investigate further what it detects. And also beyond that, basically taking your time that you spend towards security, investigating threats that are detected, but also doing proactive investigations, threat hunting. And that's really where you get the maximum value from a SIEM. And on top of that, so really, you can think of a SIEM not as a tool that would replace an analyst, but as a tool, as basically a force multiplier, something that can basically empower an analyst. And so that being said, having security domain expertise is really helpful. Being able to, not only, just being able to set up your SIEM once, but also being able to modify it as your threat landscape changes and as your threat model changes. So, so at this point, I'll hand it over to you, Ben, to talk about a little bit about how Cygilant can help with that.
Thanks, Jake. And something just up front to say, well, I think you've been stealing my slides as well. But something straight up front to say is that I really do love working with LogPoint for those very reasons. Even as a security service provider, we have the same challenges as end users, and the faster, the more optimal, and the better value we can get from the same means we can deliver more security value. I mean, that's absolutely key for us. And where that comes in, effectively, the modern SIEM, we look at LogPoint as our poster child for the modern SIEM, really gives us advantages that we otherwise can't use, otherwise can't deliver. So it is absolutely critical that all of your security controls, all of your security practices come back into that SIEM, which can then be monitored and alerts can then be escalated. I mean, at the end of the day, if a tree falls in a forest and nobody's listening, it doesn't matter if it makes any noise or not, because there was no one there to hear it. And that's the reality. Same with security. If an alert fires, but no one is monitoring, may as well not have fired. And so that's where we come in and delivery of an effective security solution. And what I mean by that is that security products help you achieve a goal. They are tools, but you need someone to operate the tool. And it's absolutely critical that that's part of your overall security strategy from start to end. And I've said before, but I'll repeat again, that really the modern SIEM fits into the core aspects of what basic security requires to be done well. And I mean, the most advanced tool in the world doesn't work unless you cover the other bases. I mean, if you have the biggest gate in history and you don't have a fence, well, it doesn't matter. So from my perspective and from Cygilant's perspective, we look at covering the basics with those best in breed solutions across the board, feeding up to and including LogPoint SIEM. So for that, you've got vulnerability scanning and management. You need to know what you're vulnerable to. You've got patch management. You need to know, well, if I'm vulnerable to it, have I patched it? Or when am I going to patch it? And what are my exposures there? You need to protect your endpoints. Antivirus 10 years ago, endpoint protection now, but you need to make sure you have something local which can look after your devices, that can provide antivirus type functionality, as well as things like hash analysis, as well as feeding back and giving you that security control across your whole network at a ubiquitous level as well. It needs to work across all your devices. You need to be able to cover all of your endpoints. And then all of that feeds into your SIEM. So all of that feedback from all of your alerting, all of your detections feeds back through part of your security program to the SIEM, which is then monitored. Cygilant provide that service to monitor your SIEM via LogPoint to know exactly what's occurring and then only escalate the things that are important. It's really important there to have that trusted security partner to provide the service hand in hand with it. Joe, I think next slide to me as well. So whenever it comes down to it, it's, well, how do you really tell the difference? In this case, it's how do we tell the difference? What is benign and what is actually just related to the activity of the higher education authority or the higher education body? And what's malicious? What is intentional? And all of this really comes down to a couple of key concepts. The most important is a strong knowledge partnership with us and the customer. I mean, that's it. We need to know your environment. We need to know your users. We need to know your patterns. We need to know how your business operates in the same way as you know it, so that we're in a position to determine what is risky, what is not risky, what is a threat, what is not, what is a breach, what is not. And that is part of your security solution or your program. It's not just a product, it's the full solution, end to end. Covers all of your bases and make sure that there is someone in the forest listening when that tree falls, and they're going to pick up the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning and ring you and let you know, so that whenever you come to remediate, you're remediating a very small problem rather than the whole forest having burnt down. So absolutely critical from that perspective to partner the elements together that you need. And as well as that, we also tailor the solution. So whenever we say, how do we tell the difference? Well, learning. Now, user event behavior analysis, UEBA, is a fantastic tool. And as Jake said, I don't look forward to replacing security analysis. I don't look forward to replacing our jobs. What I look forward to is it allowing us to spend more time focused on different types of threats. I said before that attackers continue to evolve their behavior, and that means our techniques, our tools, and our defenses have to continue to evolve. The analyst, the security analyst, is the front line in the defense. We need to arm them with the best tools, the best techniques, and the best systems, so they keep up to date with attackers. And as the new attacks come out, we know that the tooling has gone in place to protect us against the old attacks and do it more optimally and do it to a better standard. So we develop that analysis partnership with our customers. We work out how to respond based on what you need. So for example, if your institution has a DMZ, a demilitarized zone network that you literally don't care about, every device on it is deep frozen. On a reboot, it returns to normal. You don't care if it gets infected. You don't care if it gets breached, because it's just an end terminal, let's say in a cybersecurity lab that's intentionally designed for this. Well, we can know that. We can learn that. You can share that knowledge with us. And from that point onwards, we won't raise alerts for that. We'll tune them out. We'll filter them out. If anything unusual happens there or anything really worthy of note, we can over-escalate. But it means you have that human in place who's able to make that judgment call based on the knowledge you've shared with us. And as well as Jake said, security is never done. You can't consider security like an agile sprint. You don't say, okay, it's going to take us 3 sprints and then we're done. It's never done. Your environment continues to evolve. Your users continue to evolve, and your attackers continue to evolve. And for that reason, security is constant. You have to keep up to date. So whether it be monitoring what's there, whether it be helping you respond to threats and alerts, whether it be adding new content to detect the latest threats, or whether it be just working to tune what you have there to get the most bang for your buck. That's what the partnership is that we can give you. And it all comes down to that knowledge partnership. And a key part of that is context, which, Jake, handing over to you for context.
Sure. Yes. Thanks, Ben. And so, I mean, if I had to describe what a SIEM does in one word, I think the word context probably is the one that I would pick, because really, that's what you're doing with a SIEM, or that's the goal of a SIEM, is to provide context. And sometimes it's referred to as situational awareness, but it's basically the same thing. It's being able to have the awareness of what's going on in your environment at any particular time, such that you can detect threats and you can also respond to them accordingly. And so, the way we achieve context, of course, is by collecting security-related information, typically in logs. And I would say the great thing about technology, in software in general, is that basically all software has the ability to produce logs, and so it's really easy to get that context from various pieces of various technologies. I would say that the one challenge, though, is that basically from these logs you have a very much a point in time reference. So it's not necessarily the big picture, but it's a picture. So to think of it as each log source can be like a single video camera on a building, right? And so if you're reliant on just looking at the screens of each individual camera, then you're going to spend a lot of time kind of bouncing around. And really, you've got a lot of different devices in your environment that can produce alerts, things that that they think you should look at. But then the problem becomes, like which one do I focus on? And so really, the challenge of a SIEM, as I mentioned previously, is taking a very large amount of information and funneling that down into a small, manageable amount of information, prioritized in such a way that what you choose to look at is the most pressing, the most important thing to look at that time. And so, there's a variety of different ways within LogPoint that we give you that context. But certainly at the most basic level, we're taking in logs from different places, and we can actually add context to those individual logs. So if a log references, let's say, an IP address, it's helpful for the analyst to know what the DNS name of that IP address, what the reputation of that IP address. Is this IP address known to be part of a botnet? What is the WHOIS information for this IP address? And likewise, if a log contains information about a user, it might be helpful to know what's the email address of this user, because we also want to cross-reference that with logs coming out of the email server. And so basically, with adding context and enriching logs, basically we're empowering both the analyst to be able to do his job more effectively, because we've already kind of pre-done some of the work that they would otherwise have to do in terms of looking up information. And then we're also empowering the analytics themselves. So if you can add additional context to logs, you can make more correlations between different log sources. The example I mentioned with email addresses. So if every log that comes in has an IP address, and you add to that who's logged into it, and what their email address is, and maybe what their MAC address is, that just greatly expands the amount of correlations that you can do with other log sources. And so really within LogPoint, there's a lot of this context that we're adding, and some of it it is more predictive or proactive, I should say, where we're kind of doing work up front. And of course, some of it is manual as well. So giving you the tools to be able to, within the context of an investigation, bring in another data source and add additional context to, add these relationships that weren't done at the time of ingestion. And so definitely within LogPoint, our goal is to add more of those capabilities that are more proactive and predictive, I should say, whereby we're attempting to do some of the work that an analyst would do otherwise by learning some of what they do. So we're not necessarily attempting to build another SOAR tool, but we are starting to add in more capabilities whereby we know that an analyst, upon learning about this type of incident, is probably going to want to run these types of queries. So why don't we run them in advance and make them really easy to access? And just one more thing on context. So context really is really important within the context of I just used that word twice without two different meanings, but within the context of UEBA, basically user and entity behavioral analytics. And so, the use case that's that I like to give with UBA is, like, let's say that you see someone in your environment go to a file sharing website and load some data up there. Now, is that good or bad? And so it's a really tough question to answer with just traditional SIEM, because there are definitely some legitimate reasons why someone would potentially use a file sharing website, and these are legitimate business reasons. But certainly there are some nefarious reasons as well. And so if you need to spend all of your time kind of chasing down every time someone goes to a file sharing website, you're probably going to go crazy. I mean, you're certainly going to spend a lot of time doing that. So what UEBA is really good for is kind of adding that context and doing it in kind of a machine learning manner, so that we can run these algorithms and basically alert you to something that that may or may not be malicious. So in terms of someone going to a file sharing website, you want to ask the questions, what did they do before or after that? Did you see a lot of connections to other machines around them before that? Did you see some failed logins? So these are all things that can kind of help you to ascertain as to whether something might be at the very least suspicious. And so what we're attempting to do with UBA is to add that context and basically do a lot of the analytical, the kind of predictive addition of context to things before we alert the analyst to it, so that we're essentially helping them do some of their job.
Awesome, Jake. Thank you so much. I love that analogy of the camera on the building. I'd never heard that before, but it's so true. Ben, were you going to add something?
Yeah, sorry, I was actually just going to say thank you because something that I've said in previous webinars is that an awful lot of people sell security products, but very few of them actually consider making the lives of the users of those products easier. And that's the reality, because when it comes down to it, security at the minute is mostly a focus and a priority game. I mean, I could spend all day, every day, just looking at alerts. And there are alerts, and you get diminishing returns. The problem is that's a very fine line and hard to work out. So what really helps me, what helps my team, what helps my analysts is to know that instead of having to pay 10 minutes of click tax every time an alert fires, we don't need to go and do the same searches and click on the same buttons and get the same reports. Most of that work can be front loaded, and that allows us with every alert to go deeper and to go deeper and to go deeper and to go more and more and more. And having UEBA layered there means that instead of looking at every failed logon, well, we let UEBA do that, and it only tells us about the ones that are suspicious, because conversation this morning, it does happen. We have a user who just forgets his password every Monday morning, fails to log in 10 times. And it's with one of our customers. It's normal. I mean, we've all forgotten a password, but this user is consistent. They always forget on Monday mornings. And with our higher educational customers, there's a mass forget around about the start of each semester, where people have been away from the campus for 2-3 months and can't remember a thing. And just the number of password lockouts, the numbers in the tens of thousands, just for that week or two. And having these tools is critical, because what it buys us is more time to go and look at the more advanced threats that threat actors are now using, the more social engineering type threats, the subtler ones, the ones that won't get picked up by automation, but we can pick up. That's exactly it. So that's what I'm saying. Thank you for. Thanks.
It's pretty refreshing to hear that. I mean, Jake, you made a reference to acting as the force multiplier. Here at Cygilant, that is something that we take great pride in. As a service provider, that is what we want to do at the end of the day, is act as an extension of your team and become that force multiplier for you, allowing you just to do the job more efficiently. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day. You're working at an educational institution that's a legit revolving door every year. It's hard to keep up. So, we are proud to offer cybersecurity as a service for educational institutions to help them protect against that ever-evolving threat landscape. And for those that don't know, Cygilant, we combine best-of-breed technology such as LogPoint with the human element. So organizations get the people, process, and technology that they need, where they otherwise couldn't achieve that themselves, because we know that budget's a concern, lack of resources is a concern, and that's what we're here to help you guys with. So, the services that we provide include a 24/7 global SOC. So monitoring your network 24/7 when you folks, are home on the weekend or after hours, when you're at spring break and all the students are gone, you can actually focus on some of the objectives that you had on your plate that you weren't able to focus on while class was in session. You don't have to worry about cyber, knowing that, there's organizations like Cygilant picking up or doing the heavy lifting for you. So in addition to LogPoint, a leader in the SIEM space, Cygilant also partners with best-of-breed technologies such as SentinelOne for endpoint protection, Avanti for patch management, and Alien Vault as well for SIEM, among many others. So we're here to give you a repeatable process. If folks have any questions, now's the time. Feel free to utilize the Q&A feature. I also want to let you guys know that anyone who is attending today will receive a copy of the recording. So keep a lookout for that. We'll probably hit your inbox on Monday. So yeah, Jake and Ben, thank you guys so much for another excellent webinar. Jake, I love having you on with us. It's incredible. What you guys are doing is great.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, we'll let you get back to your day. Hope everyone enjoys the weekend, and keep a lookout for more upcoming webinars. And we look forward to seeing you there. Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody. Take care.
Bye now. Good job, Ben. All right, peace.